Katharine Hepburn's characters consistently challenge traditional portrayals of women in film by embodying a complex blend of power, independence, and emotional honesty. Unlike many female characters confined to narrow roles of passivity or conformity, Hepburn's women assert their own desires and values, often standing in contrast to more conventional female figures who represent societal expectations. Film scholar Andrew Britton argues that it's not just the roles Hepburn plays, but Hepburn herself who is the most radical. In a review of Britton's work, critic William Mistacelli explains that Hepburn's screen presence establishes identities in her films that would not submit, as the fictional heroines do, to the terms imposed on them by the film's storylines. Even when the plot limits her character, Hepburn's presence introduces a version of womanhood that refuses to be fully contained. Through her roles, she redefines what it means to be a woman on screen, showing that strength, love, and freedom can exist alongside vulnerability and authenticity. True womanhood in Hepburn's films lies in choosing one's own path rather than accepting a role written by others. These ideas of autonomy, defiance, and independence in a female character are captured eloquently by two women discussing Hepburn's anomalies during the Cinema Ritrovato. Through the use of the male gaze, they emphasize further how exceptional Hepburn was, as her films were not overly sexualized and traditionally feminine to cater towards the male audience, but instead focused on her strength and power. This resilience towards Hollywood tendencies, among many other things discussed in the Dom's Lab Auditorium, all contribute to her greater character to be elaborated upon in the duration of this video.
Molly Haskell, a renowned film critic, spoke alongside Imogen Sarah Smith at the Dom's Lab Auditorium for Katharine Hepburn, a Woman of the Years. Each question directed toward Haskell concerned Hepburn's remarkable career, focusing specifically on her role as a powerhouse in Hollywood and her ability to challenge the status quo, both in her personal life and through her characters. Haskell emphasized the actress's unconventional nature, her comments supporting her argument that Hepburn combated typical norms for women in film by bringing a radical sense of independence and strength to her roles, as well as to her life. For example, Haskell noted Hepburn's tendency to wear pants, a seemingly simple wardrobe choice, though this was not very common for actresses of her time. In addition, Hepburn's boyish sense of self and quirky tendencies were discussed at length, also atypical but fiercely original and authentic to Hepburn. Haskell also spoke of Hepburn's longevity in Hollywood, stating she was one of few women who were able to stand their ground in the industry well into their older years. These details from the discussion are key indicators of Hepburn's role as a trailblazer for women in film. She had a mind of her own, and Haskell made that abundantly clear through her analysis and discussion of the actress's uncommon life. Janet Thuman puts it best in a text she wrote for Feminist Review. Hepburn's impossibility in terms of existing categories made her not only problematic as a star, but also potentially subversive. Thus, for patriarchal hegemony, ideologically dangerous as a woman. Thuman and Haskell clearly see Katharine Hepburn for what she was, a force to be reckoned with.
Love in Hepburn's films is never a passive reward or a woman's destiny. It is a decision made on her own terms, even when those terms clash with the world around her. Eroticon in 1929, directed by Gustav Macady, follows Andrea, a young woman whose brief seduction by a wealthy traveler sets off a chain of events that test her strength, dignity, and capacity for love. Holiday in 1938, directed by George Cukor, stars Katharine Hepburn as Linda Seaton, a spirited woman who feels stifled by her wealthy family and finds a sense of freedom and purpose in her growing connection with the unconventional Johnny. Both Eroticon and Holiday center on women who are intelligent, emotionally complex, and deeply aware of the roles their societies expect them to play. But Andrea and Linda respond to those pressures in very different ways. Andrea is calm and observant. She doesn't speak often, but she notices everything. After being seduced and abandoned by George and later marrying Hilbert, she remains quietly watchful. Even when George re-enters her life, she measures her decisions carefully. She doesn't cause scenes, she waits, she thinks, and ultimately, she sees through George's charm. Her power lies in her restraint. Linda, by contrast, is all energy and all feeling. She questions her family's values, laughs too loudly, drinks too much, and refuses to settle into the polished life expected of her. What draws her to Johnny is not just his charm, but his refusal to chase money or status. Like her, he wants more from life than what they were born into. Film historian Ruth Barton writes that Maconay's women, quote, may appear restrained but are never truly passive, end quote. In her words, Eroticon refuses to punish its female lead and instead presents her as a, quote, strong, independent young woman who cedes authority neither to her father, nor her husband, nor her lover, end quote. That same spirit runs through Linda. She refuses to silence herself or shrink into someone else's world. Andrea stays strong through silence. Linda sets herself free by speaking up. Both women choose love, but more importantly, they choose to remain true to themselves.
We can also explore Woman of the Year and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to further exemplify Hepburn's impact on women in film. Tess Harding and Nurse Ratched, the leading ladies of both films, are powerful women. One leads in the newsroom while the other controls a psychiatric hospital. However, their stories show how films often treat powerful women, with caution or punishment. Tess, played by Katharine Hepburn, is a famous reporter. She is smart, confident, and completely in charge of her career, a testament to Hepburn's challenging of female norms. At the beginning, the film celebrates her success, but later, the story starts to suggest she has gone too far. In order to save her relationship, Tess ultimately has to change herself. In one scene, she tries to make breakfast and fails. The film plays it as comedy, but it also shows that her independence is being mocked. The story tells us it is fine for a woman to be brilliant, as long as she also plays the part of a traditional wife. This being said, Tess Harding still goes against many Hollywood norms and is a very unconventional character. Nurse Ratched is different. She is strict, quiet, and always in control. Her hair is perfect, her voice is soft, and she never shows strong emotion. But her power becomes dangerous. She hides behind politeness, and as a result, her actions hurt others. Unlike Tess, Nurse Ratched never changes. Because of that, she is shown as the villain. Not because she is cruel, but because she refuses to be warm or gentle, the way women are often expected to be, especially in film. Together, Tess and Nurse Ratched show how hard it is for women in film to hold power. Tess is too strong, so the story asks her to give it up. Ratched is too cold, so the story tears her down. In both cases, the message is clear. Women can lead, but only if they act the way others want them to. However, it's critical to reiterate both characters' power relative to the film and time period they're in, as they both stand their ground and are strong women. Hepburn's portrayal of Tess Harding was undoubtedly ahead of its time, further proof of her unconventionality as a woman in film.
Clementine and Jane both want to feel something bigger than love. They want to feel free. They want to make their own choices, even if those choices leave them uncertain or alone. They come from two very different worlds, but both are brave enough to risk heartbreak in order to stay true to themselves. Clementine, played by Kate Winslet, is unpredictable, emotional, and always moving. She does not want to be told who she is, and she is afraid of being trapped. In Eternal Sunshine, she chooses to erase the memory of her relationship rather than to live with the pain. Even after that, she ends up in the same place, sitting across from Joel again, trying to begin something new. Clementine's freedom is about change. She refuses to stay stuck, even when that means starting over with no clear path ahead. Jane, played by Katharine Hepburn in Summertime, is more careful but just as strong. She has spent her life doing what is expected of her, and now she finally takes a trip alone to Venice. She hopes something romantic will happen, and it does, but not in the way she imagined. Jane falls in love, but she does not lose herself. When the man she cares for cannot offer her something real, she leaves. It hurts, but she knows that staying would hurt more. Jane's freedom is quieter. She chooses herself with grace. Clementine runs forward. Jane walks away. Both women want to feel alive and whole, not just loved. Their freedom is not about being wild or single or fearless. It is about knowing what they need and not settling for less.
Through analyzing love, freedom, and power in the contrast of characters throughout cinematic history, Katharine Hepburn and her roles proved to be an exception in the film industry regarding societal standards for female characters. Linda in her defiance to choose her own path, Tess in her position of power in her relationship and how she is presented, and Jane's composure while maintaining her own unique identity all work together to create a remarkable story of how Hepburn's characters surpass the norms expected of film during her time. Hepburn's women embraced challenges, strength, and above all else their own autonomy, which truly redefined female positions in film and brought light to the complexity behind women, establishing them as more than just an object for the male gaze, but rather a person of their own making.